The silence was deafening. Francesca De Santis stood at the counter of Café Luna, her weathered hands trembling slightly as she pointed at the menu board. The young barista behind the register looked at her with barely concealed irritation, speaking louder and slower as if volume could bridge the gap between their worlds. "What do you want?" the barista shouted, drawing stares from other customers. Francesca's cheeks burned with humiliation. At 62, she had endured this countless times since losing her hearing in that terrible night 15 years ago, the night that changed everything for the De Santis family. She began to turn away, dignity intact but heartbreaking, when a gentle hand touched her shoulder. "Excuse me?" a soft voice said behind her. Nora Mitchell stepped forward, her warm brown eyes meeting Francesca's with genuine kindness. Without hesitation, her hands began to move in fluid, graceful motions. "Good morning. What would you like to order today?" Francesca's eyes widened in shock, then filled with tears of relief. For the first time in months, someone was truly seeing her. From a corner table, hidden behind a newspaper, Luca Montanari watched his mother's face transform. The most feared man in Miami's underworld felt his chest tighten as he witnessed something he thought he'd never see again: his mother's genuine smile. He had no idea that the waitress who just changed his mother's world was about to change his own forever. The morning rush at Café Luna was in full swing when Nora Mitchell noticed the elegant older woman standing uncertainly by the entrance. Even from across the bustling cafe, there was something regal about her posture, something that spoke of strength tempered by years of silent struggle. Nora had been working at the cafe for 8 months now, ever since her father Miguel's condition had worsened. The stroke had left him bedridden, requiring round-the-clock care that insurance barely covered. The cafe job wasn't glamorous, but it paid enough to keep their small apartment and afford his medications. She watched as the woman approached the counter, her movements careful and deliberate. The morning barista, Kevin, was new and impatient. Nora had already seen him roll his eyes at customers who took too long to order. "Next," Kevin called out, not looking up from the register. The woman stepped forward, pointing at the menu board with a graceful finger. When she didn't speak, Kevin's expression shifted to annoyance. "Ma'am, what do you want?" he said, his tone sharp. The woman pointed again, this time more urgently, her lips moving silently as she tried to communicate. Nora's heart clenched as she recognized the signs, the careful lip movements, the frustrated gestures, the way the woman's shoulders tensed with each failed attempt at communication. "What do you want?" Kevin shouted, causing several customers to turn and stare. That's when Nora saw it, the moment the woman's dignity cracked just slightly before she began to turn away. Without thinking, Nora abandoned her table-cleaning duties and hurried over. "Excuse me," she said gently, stepping beside the woman. "Kevin, I've got this." Her hands moved naturally into the flowing motions she'd practiced for years, ever since she'd first discovered American Sign Language in college. What had started as curiosity about deaf culture had become a passion, then a skill she treasured. "Good morning," she signed with a warm smile. "What would you like to order today?" The transformation on the woman's face was instantaneous. Shock gave way to relief, then to something that looked like wonder. You sign." The woman's hands moved hesitantly, as if she couldn't quite believe it. "Yes," Nora replied, her smile widening. "I love ASL. It's such a beautiful language." The woman's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling now, a radiant expression that transformed her entire face. "I would like a cappuccino, please. Extra foam. And thank you. It's been so long since someone—" "Of course," Nora signed back. "One cappuccino with extra foam coming right up. I'm Nora, by the way." "Francesca," the woman replied, her hands moving more confidently now. "Francesca De Santis." As Nora prepared the cappuccino herself, taking over from a bewildered Kevin, she chatted with Francesca in sign language. She learned that Francesca lived nearby, that she had lost her hearing 15 years ago, and that most places made her feel invisible or burdensome. "You have a gift," Francesca signed as Nora handed her the perfectly crafted cappuccino, "not just with your hands but with your heart." "Thank you," Nora replied. "Please come back any time. You're always welcome here." From his corner table, Luca Montanari had watched the entire interaction with growing amazement. He had followed his mother to the cafe, as he did most mornings when she insisted on her independence walks. His security team was positioned discreetly around the block, but Luca preferred to keep a personal eye on the most important person in his world. He had seen his mother humiliated in public before. Each time, it filled him with a rage that could level buildings. But this was different. This young woman with the kind eyes and gentle hands had given his mother something he couldn't, the simple dignity of being understood. Luca studied the waitress as she returned to her duties. She was beautiful, but not in the artificial way of the women who usually surrounded him. Her beauty was natural, unguarded, the kind that came from genuine kindness. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore the cafe's standard uniform, but she moved with an unconscious grace that caught his attention. More importantly, she had made his mother smile, really smile, for the first time since the accident that had stolen her hearing and nearly destroyed their family. As Francesca settled at a small table by the window, sipping her cappuccino with obvious pleasure, Luca made a decision. He folded his newspaper and approached the counter, where the waitress, Nora, was wiping down the espresso machine. "Excuse me," he said, his voice carrying the subtle authority that came from years of command. Nora looked up, and Luca felt an unexpected jolt as their eyes met. Hers were warm brown, flecked with gold, and completely without guile. She smiled at him, the same genuine smile she had given his mother, and something in his chest tightened. "Hi there, what can I get you?" she asked cheerfully. "Coffee, black," he said, studying her face, "and I wanted to thank you." "Thank me?" Nora looked puzzled as she poured his coffee. "For what you did for the lady over there." Luca nodded toward his mother. Not many people would have taken the time. Nora glanced over at Francesca, who was gazing out the window, with a peaceful expression. "Oh, that was nothing. Francesca is lovely. I love sign language. It's such a beautiful way to communicate." "You learned it in school?" Luca asked, accepting the coffee cup. Their fingers brushed briefly, and he noticed the slight calluses on her hands, working hands. "College, yes, but I kept studying after. There's something magical about it, you know? The way you can have entire conversations without making a sound, but still say everything that matters." Nora's eyes lit up as she spoke, and Luca found himself genuinely interested in her answer. "That's unusual," he said carefully. "Most people don't take the time to learn something like that unless they have to." Nora shrugged, a slight blush coloring her cheeks. "I guess I've always believed that everyone deserves to be heard, even if they can't speak, especially if they can't speak." The simple statement hit Luca like a physical blow. In his world, power was everything. Voices were raised through fear, respect was commanded through strength, but this woman spoke of a different kind of power, the power to include, to understand, to connect. "That's a beautiful way to look at it," he said, and meant it. "Are you a regular here?" "I don't think I've seen you before," Nora asked, tilting her head curiously. Luca hesitated. He had been coming to this cafe for weeks, always sitting in corners, always watching. But she was right. He had never actually ordered anything before. "I'm new to the area," he said, which wasn't entirely a lie. He had recently moved his primary operations to this part of Miami. "Well, welcome to the neighborhood. I hope you'll come back. The coffee's good, but the company's better," Nora said with a laugh. Before Luca could respond, another customer approached the counter. As Nora turned to help them, Luca caught sight of his mother rising from her table. Francesca walked past him without recognition. She had never seen him without his usual security detail, and he kept his distance from family business for her protection. But as she passed Nora, Francesca's hands moved in a quick sign that made Nora beam. "Thank you for seeing me," she had signed. Always Nora signed back without missing a beat in taking the new customer's order. Luca watched his mother leave with a lightness in her step he hadn't seen in years. Then he looked back at the waitress who had somehow, in the span of 10 minutes, managed to give his mother back a piece of herself, and Luca Montanari, a man who controlled everything and everyone in his world, realized he was completely out of control when it came to the woman behind the counter. 3 days later, Luca found himself back at Cafe Luna, telling himself it was purely for surveillance purposes. His mother had returned each morning, and he needed to ensure her safety. It had nothing to do with the way the waitress's face lit up when she saw familiar customers, or how her laugh seemed to brighten the entire cafe. Nothing at all. "You're back." Nora's voice carried genuine pleasure as she spotted him approaching the counter. "How did you like the coffee?" "It was adequate," Luca said, which was a lie. He barely remembered drinking it. He'd been too focused on watching her interact with his mother. Nora laughed, a sound that did dangerous things to his composure. Adequate? Wow, such high praise. I'll make sure to tell the owner that our coffee has achieved adequacy. Despite himself, Luca felt his lips twitch. When was the last time someone had teased him? When was the last time anyone had dared? Perhaps I was distracted, he admitted. Oh? By what? Nora asked as she prepared his usual black coffee without being asked. The fact that she'd remembered his order after one interaction shouldn't have pleased him as much as it did. The atmosphere, Luca said carefully. It's very welcoming here. That's the idea, Nora said, handing him the cup. Everyone should have a place where they feel comfortable, where they belong. There was that word again, belong. In Luca's world, belonging was earned through blood, loyalty, and fear. But the way Nora said it, belonging seemed like something freely given, a gift rather than a conquest. And you? Do you belong here? He asked. Something flickered across Nora's expression, too quick for most people to catch, but Luca had spent years reading micro-expressions. Pain, worry, exhaustion, carefully hidden behind her bright smile. For now, she said lightly. It pays the bills. And after, what are your plans? Nora was quiet for a moment, wiping down the counter with unnecessary focus. I don't really have the luxury of long-term plans right now. I take things day by day. Before Luca could probe further, the bell above the door chimed and Francesca entered. She moved directly to the counter, her face already brightening as she spotted Nora. Good morning, beautiful soul, Francesca signed, and Nora's entire demeanor transformed. Francesca, you're early today, Nora replied, her hands moving with increasing fluency. The usual. Please. And how is your father today? Luca's attention sharpened. Father. The same, Nora signed, and again Luca caught that flash of worry. But he had a good night. Thank you for asking. As Nora prepared his mother's cappuccino, Luca processed this new information. Nora had a father who was apparently unwell. It explained the exhaustion he sometimes glimpsed behind her cheerful exterior, the way she worked with the intensity of someone who couldn't afford to lose this job. Excuse me, a harsh voice interrupted his thoughts. A man in an expensive suit had approached the counter, clearly agitated. I've been waiting for 5 minutes. Some of us have real jobs. Nora immediately turned to him, apologetic. I'm so sorry, sir. What can I get you? Finally, large coffee, black, and make it fast. I don't have time for your little sign language show. The dismissive tone, the sneer in the man's voice, Luca felt his jaw clench. But it was the way Nora's shoulders tensed, the way Francesca's face fell, that made his vision go dark around the edges. Of course, sir, Nora said quietly, her professional mask sliding into place, coming right up. And next time, maybe focus on paying customers instead of... The man gestured rudely toward Francesca, whatever that was. The coffee cup in Luca's hand cracked. He set it down carefully and stepped closer to the counter, his movement fluid and predatory. The businessman was so focused on his phone that he didn't notice the shift in atmosphere, didn't see how other customers instinctively moved away. But Nora noticed. Her eyes widened as she took in Luca's expression, the cold fury that had made grown men beg for mercy. Is there a problem here? Luca asked, his voice deceptively calm. The businessman looked up, irritated. Yeah, actually. I'm trying to get coffee, but the staff seems more interested in playing charades with... He stopped mid-sentence as he finally looked at Luca. Really looked. Something in those dark eyes, something in the way Luca held himself, triggered every survival instinct the man possessed. I just... The businessman stammered. You just what? Luca asked, taking another step closer. I just thought you'd insult a customer, disrespect a hard-working employee. Please continue. I'm fascinated by your thought process. I didn't mean... I was just... The man was backing away now, his expensive suit suddenly looking like armor made of paper. Here's your coffee, sir, Nora said quickly, placing the cup on the counter. Her voice was steady, but Luca could see her hands trembling slightly. No charge. The businessman grabbed the coffee and practically ran for the door, leaving behind only the scent of fear and expensive cologne. The cafe was silent for a moment. Then normal conversation gradually resumed, though Luca noticed several customers glancing his way with newfound wariness. That was... Nora began, then stopped. She was staring at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," Luca said simply. "Who is he?" Francesca signed to Nora, her eyes moving between them with sharp intelligence. I don't know," Nora replied, her gaze still fixed on Luca. "A customer." But even as she signed it, Luca could see the questions forming in her mind. The way he'd moved, the authority in his voice, the fear he'd inspired, none of it fit with the image of a simple customer. "Thank you," Nora said aloud, "for standing up for Francesca, and for me." "No one should be treated that way," Luca replied, "especially not someone who shows such kindness to others." Their eyes met and held, and Luca felt something shift between them. Recognition, perhaps, or the beginning of understanding that they were both more than they appeared to be. "He's dangerous," Francesca signed to Nora, but her expression wasn't fearful. It was knowing, but not to you. "What do you mean?" Nora asked. "I've lived long enough to recognize a protector," Francesca replied. "The question is, what is he protecting you from?" Luca caught enough of the exchange to understand the gist. His mother had always been perceptive, able to read people in ways that had served their family well over the years, but her insight now created a problem. The more time he spent here, the more likely it became that someone would make the connection between the elegant deaf woman and the Montanari family. He needed to stay away. For his mother's safety, for Nora's safety, for the carefully constructed barriers he'd built between his two worlds. But as Nora smiled at him, grateful, curious, and completely unaware of the danger she was in just by knowing him, Luca realized that staying away might be the one thing he couldn't do. "I should go," he said abruptly. "Of course," Nora replied, though he caught the flash of disappointment in her eyes. "I hope we'll see you again soon." As Luca walked toward the door, he heard Francesca sign to Nora. "That one will change your life, don't be dramatic." Nora signed back with a laugh. "He's just a customer." Luca paused at the door, looking back at the woman who had no idea she'd already changed his. The call came at 2:47 a.m. Luca was in his study, reviewing shipping manifests that served as cover for less legitimate cargo, when his phone buzzed with the emergency tone reserved for family crises. "Boss?" Marco's voice was tight with concern. "It's your mother. She's at Miami General." The manifests scattered to the floor as Luca shot to his feet. "What happened?" "She fell in her apartment. Neighbor heard the noise, called 911. She's conscious, but they're running tests." Luca was already moving, grabbing his jacket and keys. "I'm on my way. Double security at the hospital. No one gets near her room without clearance." The drive to Miami General took 12 minutes, a trip that should have taken 25. Luca's mind raced through possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. His mother was the one pure thing in his dark world, the only person who knew Luca Montanari the man, rather than Luca Montanari the boss. He found her in a private room, looking small and fragile against the white hospital sheets. Her eyes were closed, but they opened when he entered and she smiled. That same radiant smile that had transformed her face at the cafe. "My stubborn son," she signed weakly. "I told them not to call you, and I told you to use the medical alert system I bought you," Luca replied, pulling a chair close to her bed. "What happened?" "I was reaching for a book on the high shelf. Lost my balance." Francesca's movements were slower than usual, and Luca noticed the bandage on her forehead. "The doctors say I have a mild concussion. They want to keep me overnight for observation." "Good. You need rest. I need to go home. I have things to do." "What things could possibly be more important than your health?" Francesca was quiet for a moment, then her hands moved with sudden animation. "I was supposed to meet someone for coffee this morning, at that little cafe. She'll worry if I don't show up." Luca's chest tightened. "The waitress?" "Nora." "Yes." Francesca's eyes sharpened, focusing on his face with uncomfortable intensity. "You know her name." It wasn't a question. Luca had learned long ago that lying to his mother was pointless. She could read him better than anyone. "I've seen her there," he admitted. "When I follow you, follow me." Francesca's hands stilled and her expression grew stern. "Luca Montanari, I am not a child." "No, but you're my mother, and in my world, that makes you a target." The fight went out of her then, replaced by the familiar sadness that always appeared when his business intruded on their relationship. "I know, my son, but I refuse to live in a cage, even a golden one. I know. That's why I stay back. why I let you have your independence. But you watch. Always. Francesca studied his face for a long moment. This girl, Nora, you care about her. It wasn't a question either, and Luca found himself unable to deny it. She's kind to you. She's kind to everyone. But that's not why you care. Before Luca could respond, there was a soft knock on the door. A nurse entered, followed by someone who made Luca's heart stop. Nora stood in the doorway, holding a small bouquet of flowers and looking uncertain. She was dressed in jeans and a simple sweater, clearly not coming from work, and her hair fell in soft waves around her shoulders. "I'm sorry," she said to the nurse. "I asked at the front desk about Francesca DeSantis. They said she was in an accident. I brought flowers, but if this isn't a good time..." Francesca's face lit up, and she gestured urgently for Nora to enter. "You came," she signed, tears forming in her eyes. "Of course I came," Nora replied, moving to the bedside. "When you didn't show up this morning, I was worried. I called around and found out you were here." She placed the flowers on the bedside table, then gently took Francesca's hand. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine, just clumsy." "You're not clumsy. You're human." Nora's smile was soft and reassuring. These things happen. It was then that she noticed Luca sitting in the corner. Her eyes widened in surprise, and something else, a flicker of understanding, that made his pulse quicken. "Oh, I didn't realize. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt," she said, looking between Luca and Francesca. "This is my son," Francesca signed, her hands moving with deliberate emphasis. "Luca." Nora's gaze snapped back to Luca, and he watched as pieces began falling into place in her mind. The protective way he'd acted at the cafe, the authority in his voice, the way other customers had instinctively moved away from him. "Your son," she repeated slowly. "Hello, Nora," Luca said, rising from his chair. "Thank you for coming. It means a great deal to her." Of course, Francesca is..." Nora looked back at the older woman, her expression softening. "She's become very special to me." "And you to her," Francesca signed to Luca, making sure Nora could see. "More than you know." An uncomfortable silence settled over the room. Nora was clearly processing the revelation, while Luca found himself caught between two worlds that were never supposed to intersect. "I should go," Nora said finally. "Let you have family time." "No," Francesca signed firmly. "Stay, please. I don't want to impose..." "You're not imposing," Luca said, and meant it. Despite the complications her presence created, he found he didn't want her to leave. "My mother clearly enjoys your company." Nora hesitated, then pulled up another chair. "How did it happen? The accident?" As Francesca explained through sign language, with Nora occasionally translating for Luca's benefit, he found himself studying the interaction between the two women. There was genuine affection there, a bond that had formed over just a few days of morning coffee conversations. It was also clear that Nora was struggling with the new information about his identity. She kept glancing at him. When she thought he wasn't looking, her expression thoughtful and slightly wary. "Francesca," Nora signed eventually, "can I ask you something personal?" "Of course, your son. What does he do for work?" The question hung in the air like a loaded gun. Francesca's hands stilled, and she looked at Luca with an expression that was part apology, part challenge. "He's in business," she signed finally. "Import and export." It was technically true, though it barely scratched the surface of Luca's operations. Nora nodded, but Luca could see she wasn't entirely satisfied with the answer. "And you?" Luca asked, deflecting attention from himself. "You mentioned your father earlier. Is he well?" Now it was Nora's turn to hesitate. He had a stroke 6 months ago. He's bedridden now. Needs constant care." "I'm sorry," Luca said, and the sympathy in his voice was genuine. "That must be difficult." "It is, but he's my father. I'd do anything for him." Nora's voice was steady, but Luca caught the underlying exhaustion, the weight of responsibility she carried. "You work so hard," Francesca signed to her. "Too hard for someone so young." "I'm fine," Nora replied, but her smile was strained. "Really?" Luca found himself wanting to ask more questions, to understand the full scope of her situation. But before he could, his phone buzzed with a text from Marco. "Situation developing, need you back." The outside world was intruding, reminding him of the dangerous reality that always lurked at the edges of moments like this. "I have to go," he said, standing reluctantly. "Business calls." "At this hour?" Francesca asked. "You know how it is," Luca replied. He leaned down to kiss her forehead gently. Rest. I'll check on you tomorrow. As he moved toward the door, Nora stood as well. I should go too. Visiting hours are probably almost over. They walked out together, the hospital corridor stretching ahead of them in uncomfortable silence. At the elevator, Nora finally spoke. She's lucky to have you, she said quietly. I'm the lucky one, Luca replied. She's the best person I know. I can see that. Nora pressed the elevator button, then turned to face him fully. Can I ask you something? Luca tensed. Of course. That day at the cafe when that man was being rude, you weren't just standing up for a stranger, were you? You were protecting your mother. Yes. And you've been watching her, following her. Yes. Nora nodded slowly. Your business. It's dangerous, isn't it? The elevator arrived with a soft ding, but neither of them moved to enter it. Yes, Luca said simply. There was no point in lying. And being around you? That's dangerous too. The question hit him like a physical blow, because it was the one he'd been asking himself since the moment he'd first seen her smile. Yes, he whispered. Nora was quiet for a long moment, studying his face. Then she stepped into the elevator and turned to face him. Your mother talks about you, you know, she said as the doors began to close. She says you're a good man who's had to make hard choices. She says the world sees your power, but she sees your heart. The doors closed before Luca could respond, leaving him alone in the corridor with the echo of words that cut deeper than any blade. Because Francesca was wrong about one thing. The world didn't just see his power, it feared it. And now, so did the one person whose opinion had started to matter more than his own safety. Nora didn't sleep that night. She lay in her small bedroom, listening to the steady rhythm of her father's breathing from the next room, trying to process everything she'd learned. Luca Montanari. The name felt dangerous even thinking it, like speaking it aloud might summon shadows. She'd done what any sensible person would do after leaving the hospital. She'd Googled him. The results were sparse but telling. A few mentions in business journals about import-export operations. A photograph from a charity gala where he stood in the background, his face partially obscured, but it was the absence of information that spoke volumes. In an age where everyone had a digital footprint, Luca Montanari was a ghost, which meant he was exactly what she suspected, dangerous. The smart thing would be to stay away, to keep her interactions with Francesca professional and polite, to avoid any further contact with her son. Nora had enough problems without adding a mysterious businessman with cold eyes and a protective streak to the list, but as she finally drifted off to sleep near dawn, it wasn't fear that filled her thoughts. It was the memory of how gently he'd kissed his mother's forehead, and the pain she'd glimpsed in his eyes when she'd asked if being around him was dangerous. The next morning at Cafe Luna, Nora found herself glancing at the door every few minutes. Francesca wouldn't be released from the hospital until afternoon, but part of her wondered if Luca might appear. He didn't, but someone else did. The man who entered at 10:30 a.m. looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine. Expensive suit, perfect hair, confident smile. He approached the counter with the easy swagger of someone accustomed to getting what he wanted. "Good morning, beautiful," he said, leaning against the counter. "I'm looking for information about one of your customers." Nora's customer service smile faltered. "I'm sorry, sir, but we don't discuss our customers." Of course, privacy, I get it." The man's smile never wavered. "But this is important. There's an older woman who comes in here. Deaf. Italian, maybe? She was in an accident yesterday." Every instinct Nora possessed screamed danger. "I really can't help you with that. Look, sweetheart, I'm not asking for her address or anything crazy. I just need to know if she's okay. I'm a family friend." The lie was smooth, practiced, but Nora caught it. Real family friends would know Francesca's name, would know she was in the hospital, would have better ways to check on her than interrogating cafe employees. "I'm sorry," Nora said firmly. "I can't help you." The man's smile turned cold. "That's unfortunate. See, I really need this information, and I'm not used to being told no. Is there a problem here?" Nora turned to see Kevin, the morning barista, approaching with a concerned expression. She'd never been so grateful for his presence. "No problem," the man said, his pleasant mask sliding back into place. "Just having a friendly conversation with this lovely lady." But his eyes, when they met Nora's, carried a clear message. This isn't over. After he left, Nora found herself shaking. She tried to tell herself it was nothing. just a pushy customer, but the encounter felt wrong in ways she couldn't articulate. The feeling only intensified when she arrived home that evening to find her apartment door slightly ajar. Nora's blood turned to ice. She always locked the door, had to, with her father unable to defend himself. She pulled out her phone, finger hovering over 911, when she heard a familiar voice from inside. "It's okay, mija. He's a friend." Miguel's voice, weak but reassuring, came from his bedroom. Nora pushed the door open cautiously and stepped inside. Luca Montanari sat in the chair beside her father's bed, looking completely out of place in the modest room, with its second-hand furniture and medical equipment. But Miguel was smiling, actually smiling, for the first time in weeks. "What are you doing here?" Nora demanded, fear and confusion making her voice sharp. "Your father and I were just talking," Luca said calmly. "He's been telling me about his work before the stroke. Engineering, wasn't it, Miguel?" 40 years, Miguel said proudly, though his words were slightly slurred. "Built half the bridges in this city." "Dad, how did he get in here?" Nora asked, moving to her father's side. "I let him in, mija. He said he was a friend of yours from the cafe." Nora's eyes snapped to Luca, who had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. "We need to talk," she said. "Now." She led him to the small living room, closing the bedroom door behind them. "How did you find my address, and what gives you the right to come into my home?" "Someone came to the cafe today asking questions about my mother," Luca said without preamble. "About you?" The words hit Nora like a physical blow. "The man in the suit. You met him?" It wasn't a question. "He said he was a family friend. Wanted to know if Francesca was okay. I didn't tell him anything." "Good." Luca's expression was grim. "He's not a friend. He works for people who would use my mother to get to me. And now they know about me, too." The reality of the situation was sinking in, cold and terrifying. "Yes." Nora sank onto the couch, her legs suddenly unsteady. "This is because of the cafe, because I helped her." "No," Luca said firmly, moving to sit across from her. "This is because of me, because I couldn't stay away." "What do you mean?" Luca was quiet for a moment, his hands clasped tightly in front of him. "I've been coming to the cafe for weeks. Watching over my mother, yes, but also watching you. Watching me. You made her smile, really smile, for the first time in years. And He looked up, meeting her eyes. "I wanted to understand how you did it. What kind of person could give that gift to a stranger? So you had me investigated." "I had you protected," Luca corrected. "There's a difference." Nora's mind reeled. "Protected from what?" "From the consequences of knowing me. From people who might try to use you to hurt me or my family. People like the man at the cafe today." "Yes. And you think coming here, involving my father, is protecting me?" Luca's jaw tightened. "Your father is a good man, Nora, but he's vulnerable. If someone wanted to hurt you, to pressure you, he would be an easy target." The words were like ice water in her veins. "Are you threatening my father?" "No." Luca's voice was sharp, almost angry. "I'm trying to protect him, both of you. From your world." "Yes. The world you chose to be part of." "The world I was born into," Luca corrected. "There's a difference." Nora studied his face, seeing something she hadn't expected. Regret, maybe even shame. "What exactly do you do, Luca?" "Things I'm not proud of. Things that keep my family safe and fed, but that come with a price." "That's not an answer." "It's the only answer I can give you." From the bedroom came the sound of Miguel calling for water. Nora rose to help him, but Luca was already moving. "I'll get it," he said. She watched through the doorway as he helped her father drink, his movements gentle and careful. Miguel smiled up at him with genuine warmth, and Nora felt her carefully constructed anger begin to crack. "He likes you," she said when Luca returned. "He's proud of you. Talks about how hard you work, how much you sacrifice for him." "It's not a sacrifice, he's my father. Not everyone would see it that way." "What's that supposed to mean?" Luca was quiet for a moment. "In my world, family loyalty is everything, but it's usually based on fear, on obligation. What you have with your father, it's rare. It's love," Nora said simply. "Yes, it is." The simple acknowledgement hung between them, heavy with unspoken implications. "The man who came to the cafe," Nora said finally. "Will he come back?" "Probably. And my father and we're in danger because of this." "Yes." Nora closed her eyes, feeling the weight of a decision she didn't want to make. "What do you want from me?" I want you to let me protect you. How? There's a safe house, secure, comfortable. You and your father would be taken care of until this situation resolves. For how long? I don't know. And in exchange? Luca's eyes met hers, and she saw something vulnerable there, something that looked almost like hope. In exchange, he said quietly, you let me try to be the man my mother thinks I am. Before Nora could respond, her phone rang. The number was unknown, but something made her answer. Hello? Miss Mitchell? The voice was smooth, cultured, and completely unfamiliar. I believe we have some mutual friends to discuss. Nora's eyes flew to Luca, who had gone very still. I'm sorry, who is this? Someone who's very interested in your relationship with the Montanari family. I think we should meet. The line went dead. Luca was already on his feet, his phone in his hand. Pack a bag, he said, his voice carrying absolute authority. We're leaving now. What? I can't just... Nora. He turned to face her, and she saw something in his eyes that made her blood run cold. They have your number. They know where you live. If you want to keep your father safe, we leave now. From the bedroom came Miguel's voice, confused and worried. Mija, what's happening? Nora looked at her father's doorway, then at Luca's grim expression, then at the phone still clutched in her hand. The choice, she realized, had already been made for her. The safe house was nothing like Nora had expected. Instead of some sterile fortress-like building, Luca had brought them to a sprawling beach house in Key Biscayne, all glass and light, with the ocean stretching endlessly beyond floor-to-ceiling windows. Medical equipment had been delivered within hours, transforming one of the bedrooms into a comfortable space for Miguel. How? Nora asked, as she watched professional nurses settle her father into the hospital-grade bed. Money opens doors, Luca said simply. And I have a lot of doors to open. It had been 3 days since the phone call, 3 days of living in a strange bubble where her biggest worry was whether her father was comfortable, where meals appeared without her cooking them, where she didn't have to count every dollar. It should have been a relief. Instead, it felt like a beautiful prison. You can't keep us here forever, Nora said on the third evening, finding Luca on the deck overlooking the ocean. I'm not keeping you anywhere, he replied without turning around. You're free to leave any time. And go where? Back to my apartment that's probably being watched? Back to the cafe where strange men ask questions about your mother? No. Luca's voice was quiet. You can't go back to any of that. The finality in his tone made something cold settle in Nora's chest. What do you mean? Luca turned to face her, and she saw exhaustion in his features, a weariness that went deeper than lack of sleep. The man who called you. His name is Vincent Torino. He runs a rival organization, one that's been trying to move into our territory for months. And he's decided that the best way to hurt me is through the people I care about. The words hung in the air between them, loaded with implications that made Nora's heart race. The people you care about? She repeated slowly. Yes. Your mother. Yes. And me? Luca's eyes met hers, and she saw the truth there before he spoke it. Yes. Nora felt the deck shift beneath her feet, though she knew it was solid. You barely know me. I know enough. What could you possibly know? We've had maybe a dozen conversations. I know you learned sign language because you believe everyone deserves to be heard, Luca said, stepping closer. I know you work yourself to exhaustion to take care of your father. I know you make my mother smile in a way she hasn't since she lost her hearing. I know you're brave enough to stand up to rude customers and kind enough to visit a woman in the hospital even though you'd only known her for days. That doesn't mean you care about me, doesn't it? The question was soft, almost vulnerable, and it made something flutter in Nora's chest that she didn't want to examine too closely. This is crazy, she said, backing away from him. This whole situation is insane. I'm a waitress, Luca. I serve coffee and clean tables. I don't belong in your world. My world is the problem, Luca said. Not you. Then leave it. The words came out before Nora could stop them, and she saw Luca's expression harden. You think it's that simple? I think if you wanted out, you'd find a way. And my mother, my responsibilities, the people who depend on me? There are always choices. Not for people like me. People like you? Nora's voice rose. What does that mean? It means I was born into this life. It means I have blood on my hands that will never wash clean. It means that even if I wanted to walk away, which I can't, there would always be people like Torino who see me as a threat. So you just accept it? You just decide that this is who you are, and everyone around you has to live with the consequences? Yes, the word was flat, final, because the alternative is worse. What alternative? Luca was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the darkening ocean. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. My father tried to go legitimate. He wanted out of the family business, wanted to build something clean for his children. What happened? They killed him, and my older brother, and they would have killed my mother and me too if my uncle hadn't stepped in. Nora felt her anger deflate, replaced by something that felt dangerously like sympathy. How old were you? 12. And your uncle taught me that the only way to protect the people you love is to be stronger, more ruthless, more feared than anyone who might threaten them. Is that what you believe? Luca turned to look at her, and she saw something raw in his expression. It's what I've had to believe. Until what? Until I met a waitress who made me remember what it felt like to want something other than power. The admission hung between them, heavy with possibility and danger in equal measure. Luca, Nora began, but he held up a hand. I know what you're going to say, that this is impossible, that we're from different worlds, that caring about me will only bring you pain. Is that not true? It's absolutely true. Then why? Because for the first time in 22 years I've found something worth the risk. Before Nora could respond, the sliding door behind them opened. Francesca stepped onto the deck, moving carefully but steadily. She'd been released from the hospital that morning and brought to the safe house, much to her vocal displeasure. You two are very loud for people trying to have a private conversation, she signed with a slight smile. We weren't trying to be private, Nora replied automatically, then blushed as she realized what she'd admitted. Good, because I have something to say to both of you. Francesca moved to stand between them, her gaze moving from her son to Nora and back again. Luca, you are my son and I love you, but you are also a fool. Mother, let me finish. Francesca's hands moved with sharp authority. You think that keeping people at a distance protects them. But isolation isn't protection. It's just another kind of prison. You don't understand the dangers. I understand them better than you think. Francesca's expression grew sad. I lost my hearing because of those dangers, remember? Because someone wanted to hurt you through me. Luca's face went pale. That's not... You said it was an accident. I lied. Francesca's hands stilled for a moment. The explosion that took my hearing? It was meant for you. I was in the wrong place, at the wrong time. Mother, no. Luca's voice broke. Why didn't you tell me? Because I knew you would blame yourself. Because I knew you would use it as another reason to push people away. Nora watched the exchange with growing understanding. The careful distance Luca maintained, the way he'd tried to protect his mother by following her instead of accompanying her, it all made sense now. And you, Francesca turned to Nora, are just as foolish. I don't understand. You think that because his world is dangerous, love isn't worth the risk. But love is always a risk. The question is whether the person is worth it. Francesca looked at her son, her expression infinitely tender. This man learned sign language in 3 days so he could communicate with me after I lost my hearing. He built a medical wing in his house so I could live with him after the accident. He follows me to coffee shops to make sure I'm safe, but stays far enough away that I can maintain my independence. He is dangerous, yes, but he is also the most loving person I know. Nora's eyes moved to Luca, who was staring at his mother with an expression of wonder and pain. You learned sign language for her? Nora asked softly. Of course I did, Luca replied, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. And you, Francesca, signed to Luca, need to stop thinking that love is a weakness. It's the only thing that makes any of this worth it. A comfortable silence settled over them, broken only by the sound of waves against the shore. Finally, Luca spoke. Torino called again today, he said quietly. Nora's heart clenched. What did he want? To arrange a meeting. He says he has a proposition. You're not going. I have to. It's the only way to end this. It's a trap. Probably. Then don't go. Luca turned to face her fully, and she saw the resolution in his eyes. If I don't go, he'll keep escalating. He'll go after you, after my mother, after anyone he thinks I care about. The only way to stop him is to face him. There has to be another way. There isn't. Yes, there is, Francesca signed, her hands moving with sudden determination. Both Luca and Nora turned to look at her. You don't go alone. Mother, absolutely not. Not me, Francesca interrupted. Her. What? Nora and Luca said simultaneously. Torino wants to hurt you through the people you love. But what if the person you love isn't a victim? What if she's a partner? I don't understand, Nora said. You speak his language, Francesca signed to her. Not Italian, the language of inclusion, of seeing people as human rather than tools. If he meets you, if he sees what Luca sees in you, he'll realize that hurting you would destroy something beautiful, Luca finished, understanding dawning in his eyes. That's insane, Nora said. I can't just walk into a meeting with a crime boss. You wouldn't be walking into anything, Luca said slowly. You'd be showing him that I have something worth protecting, something worth changing for. And if it doesn't work, then at least we face it together. Nora looked between them, Francesca with her determined expression, Luca with his careful hope, and realized that somewhere in the past few days, her life had become irreversibly intertwined with theirs. This is crazy, she said finally. Yes, Luca agreed. It could get us all killed. Yes, and you're asking me to trust you with my life. I'm asking you to trust me with our lives. Nora closed her eyes, thinking of her father sleeping peacefully in the house behind them, of Francesca's gentle smile, of the way Luca had looked when he'd admitted she was worth the risk. When she opened them, both Montanari's were watching her with identical expressions of hope and fear. Okay, she said quietly. Okay, I trust you. The words came easier than she'd expected. I trust both of you. Luca stepped closer, his hand reaching up to cup her face gently. You realize what this means? That I'm probably insane. That you belong to me now, Luca said softly, his thumb tracing her cheek. And I belong to you. In my world, that's not something said lightly. In any world, that's not something said lightly, Nora replied, her heart racing at the intensity in his eyes. Finally, Francesca signed with obvious satisfaction. Now, let's plan how to end this so you can both stop being so dramatic. Despite everything, Nora found herself laughing. Does it run in the family, the drama? You have no idea, Luca said, but he was smiling too, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him since this all began. The meeting was set for the next evening at Torino's restaurant in South Beach. As Luca explained the plan, Nora felt her nervousness growing, but also something else, a strange sense of rightness, as if this was exactly where she was supposed to be. Remember, Luca said as they prepared to leave the safe house, you're not a victim in this, you're my partner, my equal, let him see that. And if he doesn't? Luca's expression hardened. Then he'll learn why crossing the Montanari family was the last mistake he'll ever make. As they drove toward what could be their future or their doom, Nora realized that somewhere between serving coffee and learning to love a dangerous man, she had found exactly where she belonged. 2 years later, the morning sun streamed through the windows of the new Café Luna, the second location that had opened 6 months ago in Coral Gables. Nora moved between tables with practiced ease, but now she wore a simple gold band on her finger that caught the light with every gesture. The meeting with Torino had ended differently than anyone expected. Faced with Nora's quiet strength and Luca's obvious transformation, the rival boss had seen an opportunity for alliance rather than war. The territories were redrawn, the threats ended, and Luca had begun the slow process of legitimizing his operations. It wasn't complete, might never be complete, but it was a start. Good morning, beautiful, familiar hands signed as arms wrapped around her from behind. Good morning, husband, Nora signed back, leaning into Luca's embrace. The words still felt new, wonderful, like a gift she got to unwrap every day. They'd married 6 months ago in a small ceremony at the beach house, with Miguel walking her down the aisle, and Francesca serving as both mother of the groom and maid of honor. How's the new location doing? Luca asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. Better than expected. We had 3 deaf customers yesterday and the staff handled it perfectly. It had been Nora's idea to train all employees in basic sign language. What had started as a way to honor Francesca had become the cafe's signature, a place where everyone truly was welcome. And the other news? Luca's voice carried a note of barely contained excitement. Nora turned in his arms, her hand moving instinctively to her still flat stomach. Dr. Martinez confirmed it this morning. 12 weeks. The smile that spread across Luca's face was blinding. 12 weeks? 12 weeks. He spun her around, right there in the middle of the cafe, drawing amused looks from customers and staff. When he set her down, His hands moved to frame her face. Ti amo, he whispered. Ti amo così tanto. I love you too, Nora replied. But you're being dramatic again. It's a family trait. You'll have to get used to it. I think I already have. From across the cafe, Francesca looked up from her morning cappuccino, the same order she'd placed every day for 2 years, and smiled. Miguel sat beside her, his recovery remarkable though not complete, practicing the signs she'd been teaching him. They're happy, Miguel signed slowly to Francesca. Finally, she replied, though I knew from the beginning. How? Because some people are meant to find each other. They just needed the right language. Miguel looked confused. Sign language? No, Francesca smiled, watching as Luca and Nora moved together with the unconscious synchronization of people who belong to each other. The language of love. As if sensing her gaze, Nora looked over and waved. Then her hands moved in a message meant just for Francesca. Thank you for teaching us both how to listen. Thank you for teaching us both how to speak, Francesca signed back. The cafe bustled around them, a mix of languages, cultures and stories, all finding common ground over coffee and kindness. In one corner, a businessman practiced basic signs with his deaf colleague. At another table, a young mother taught her hearing daughter to fingerspell her name. And at the center of it all, Luca Montanari, once the most feared man in Miami, helped his wife serve coffee to customers who had no idea they were being waited on by a former crime boss and the woman who had saved his soul. A deaf woman couldn't order coffee, Luca murmured to Nora as they worked side by side, until the waitress signed back as her Mafia Boss son watched. Is that how you remember it? Nora asked with a laugh. That's how it started, Luca corrected, but this, he gestured around the cafe at Francesca and Miguel, at the life they'd built together. This is how it continues. As the morning rush began in earnest, Nora caught sight of their reflection in the window. 2 people who had found each other across impossible circumstances, who had learned that love wasn't about speaking the same language, but about being willing to learn new ones. And in the gentle chaos of the cafe they'd built together, surrounded by the family they'd chosen and the community they'd created, Nora knew that some stories didn't end. They just began again, every single day, with the simple act of reaching out to understand someone else. The end.